"Hey, what do you think you're doing to my son?" The voice cuts through the diner like a thunderclap. Heads turn. Forks freeze midair. For a split second, no one breathes. The entire diner falls silent, except for the faint hum of the neon sign outside. Moments before that voice echoed, the diner had felt like any other lazy afternoon. Sunlight cutting through blinds, soft chatter, the smell of coffee and grease. But in one corner booth, something ugly was unfolding. A tall man in a black leather jacket, his face red with anger, towered over a small black boy who couldn't be older than 10. The boy's back was pressed against the table, his hands trembling as the man shouted down at him. "You bumped into me, kid!" "You think that's funny?" The boy tried to stammer a word. I didn't mean," but before he could finish, the man shoved him. Hard. The sound of the boy's shoes screeching across the floor made every heart in the room drop. A woman gasped. A coffee cup clinked against a saucer. The man didn't care. He leaned forward again, spitting out words that burned the air. "You people never learn respect, do you?" And that's when the door swung open. The black man in the suit, broad-shouldered, sharp-eyed, had been walking up to the diner moments earlier, smiling to himself about the surprise milkshake he was bringing for his son. But that smile died the second he looked through the glass. Now he stood frozen at the doorway for a split second, watching his little boy stumble backward in fear. "Hey!" His voice thundered again, louder this time. "Get your hands off my son!" The man in the leather jacket turned, caught off guard but unafraid. He sneered. "Your son? Then maybe you should teach him some manners before he goes around bumping into people." The father took a step closer, jaw tight, fists clenched. "You don't talk to him. You talk to me." Tension rippled through the room. The man in the booth to the left muttered something under his breath but didn't move. The two women at the other table just stared, wide-eyed, torn between fear and fascination. The boy's eyes darted between them, his father's calm fury, the stranger's boiling rage, and all he could whisper was, "Dad." The father reached out a steady hand, pulling his son gently behind him. "It's okay, son. I got you." For a heartbeat, no one moved. The father and the man stood face to face, two worlds colliding in the middle of a diner that suddenly felt too small for both. "You got a problem?" the man sneered. "'Cause I'm not afraid to finish what he started." The father's voice dropped low, steady as steel. "You already finished enough." The man took a step forward, but the father didn't flinch. The boy clung to his father's sleeve, trembling, and just when it felt like something violent was about to happen, the faint wail of a police siren echoed outside, distant but closing in. The man froze, his jaw tightening. The father didn't look away. He just said quietly, "Walk away." "While you still can." The leather-jacketed man hesitated, his glare flickering with the first sign of uncertainty. Then he spat on the floor, turned sharply, and stormed out. The diner exhaled all at once. The father kneeled beside his son, brushing a hand over his shoulder. "You okay, Malik?" The boy nodded weakly, eyes glossy. "I didn't do anything, Dad." "I swear." "I know," his father said softly. "I know you didn't." But as he turned his eyes toward the door, the one still swinging from where the man had left, his calm expression hardened again, because this wasn't just one man's anger. It was something bigger, something that had been following them for years. And deep down, he knew this was just the beginning. Look at him. "Still hiding behind his daddy?" The words sliced through the diner like glass. Everyone turned again. The tension that had just started to fade came roaring back. The man in the leather jacket stood just outside the glass door now, his reflection split by sunlight and shadows. His voice was loud enough for everyone to hear. He smirked, wiping the corner of his mouth like he'd just won something. The father turned slowly, still kneeling beside Malik. "You need to leave," the man chuckled. "Leave?" "Nah. I think I'll stay and watch how this tough guy teaches his brat some respect." He pointed toward the boy, his grin wide, mocking. Malik flinched, gripping his father's sleeve tighter. "Dad," he whispered. The father rose to his full height, calm but unyielding. The light hit his face, half in shadow, half bright, like a man standing between peace and rage. "You've said enough," but the man wasn't done. He took another step forward, pushing the diner door open again with a harsh squeak. "What's wrong? Cat got your tongue? Or maybe you think being dressed in a fancy suit makes you better than the rest of us." A quiet murmur rippled through the diner. Someone whispered, "Just let it go, man." But the man ignored it. He was feeding off the silence, the eyes watching him. "You think you belong here?" He continued, circling the words like poison. "You people never do." That sentence landed heavy. Malik's face dropped. His father's jaw clenched, not in anger but in heartbreak. It wasn't the first time he'd heard that line, and it probably wouldn't be the last. The man smirked wider, thinking he'd won. What, no comeback? Guess I was right. But then something shifted. The father took one step forward, closing the space between them. His voice stayed low, almost too calm. "You're loud because you're weak." The smirk vanished. The man blinked, caught off guard. "You need people to watch," the father continued, steady, unshaken. "You need someone smaller to hurt so you can feel big again. But deep down, you know exactly who you are." The man's face reddened. "You think you know me?" "I've met 100 men like you," the father said. Same anger, same fear, same emptiness. The silence that followed was deafening. Even the diner's clock ticked slower. The man's hand twitched, as if debating whether to swing or walk away. Then Malik spoke, quietly, almost trembling. "Dad, please, let's just go." That broke the moment. The father turned to his son, hand resting gently on his shoulder. "You're right, son." He guided Malik toward the counter to pay for their untouched meal. The waitress, eyes wide with pity, whispered, "You don't have to pay, sir." But the father shook his head. "No, we finish what we start." The man outside stood fuming, muttering under his breath, as the father placed the money on the counter and walked past him without another glance. The boy clung to his father's arm as they stepped outside, the bright sunlight washing over them like a spotlight. For a moment, the world was quiet again. But as they reached their car, Malik looked up, eyes wet. "Why didn't you stop him, Dad? Why didn't you hit him back?" The father paused, hand on the car door. His voice was calm, too calm. "Because some fights don't end with fists, son." Malik looked down, confused and hurt. But his father's eyes, fixed on the diner behind them, told a different story. A storm was brewing inside him, and this time he wasn't planning to walk away. "You said this script was undecipherable?" Her voice was calm. Too calm, Dr. Mancini froze mid-sentence. The same girl he'd mocked minutes earlier now stood by the projector screen, her hands still trembling from the mop she'd dropped. Every head in the conference hall turned toward her. Phones lifted. Whispers began. The millionaire scholar gave a small laugh, sharp and condescending. "I beg your pardon?" She didn't flinch. "Your translation on slide 7? It's wrong," the crowd gasped. One man actually coughed to hide a laugh. Mancini straightened his tie, smiling like a lion humoring a child. "And you would know that because—" Her gaze didn't move. "Because my father wrote it." The room froze. Cameras clicked. Someone whispered, "Wait, what did she just say?" Mancini blinked, feigning confusion. "Your father?" He chuckled. "My dear, this manuscript predates even your grandparents. I discovered it myself during my field expedition in Nigeria. You must be mistaken." She took one slow step closer to the podium. "He used to call it the language of storms. He said no one else understood it because it was never about words. It was about rhythm." Mancini's confident smirk began to twitch. "That's quite a fantasy. But let's not waste everyone's time. Read line 5 out loud," she interrupted, softly but firmly. The silence was heavy now. No one dared breathe. He sighed dramatically. "Fine." He adjusted his glasses and read, "Ikadom Navara Taresha," which, as I've said, means the gods above hear our hunger. She shook her head. "No, it means the dead remember the thieves." A few people gasped. Others laughed nervously. Her tone didn't change. It stayed cold, deliberate. He added that phrase when his research was stolen. "When you published his work under your name." Dr. Mancini's face went pale. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. The crowd started murmuring louder. One woman whispered, "Is she saying he plagiarized her father?" A journalist in the back raised his phone camera higher. "You can test it," the girl said, turning to the audience. The syntax on line 7 follows the old Oban structure, my father's structure. Every linguist here knows that pattern. He wrote papers on it before he disappeared. The hall buzzed now, academics muttering, connecting dots, realizing. Mancini tried to laugh it off. Ridiculous. Pure coincidence. This child doesn't even... She lifted her chin. "You said I was uneducated." "You were right. I never went to university. My father couldn't afford it. But I remember every word he ever taught me. Every night he'd make me recite this language until sunrise. And the last thing he ever said to me was, 'Don't let them erase my name.'" Her voice cracked for the first time, but she didn't look away. A deep silence fell over the hall, the kind that feels like judgment. Even the lights seemed to dim. Mancini stepped back from the podium, sweat beginning to show on his temples. "You..." But before he could finish, the conference moderator leaned toward the mic. "Miss, could you translate the rest of this passage? Right here, for all of us." The girl's eyes glimmered, not with fear, but with purpose. She nodded slowly. "Gladly." As she stepped forward and began to read, her voice echoed through the marble hall like something ancient awakening. And with every word she spoke, the man who once laughed at her sank deeper into silence. "Translate it again," the moderator said quietly, his voice trembling through the mic. "Line by line." The girl stepped closer to the glowing screen. Her hands were steady now. Every syllable rolled off her tongue with precision, calm, fluent, powerful. Dr. Mancini stood frozen beside her, his eyes darting toward the audience. Every face that once smiled at him now stared with suspicion. She translated the next passage, flawlessly, shifting between languages no one in the room could have managed without notes. Latin, Yoruba, Oban, Ancient Greek. It was like watching a storm build in slow motion. When she finished, the room erupted in whispers. One scholar whispered, "That's impossible. Even experts struggle with those dialects." Another murmured, "She didn't even pause." Mancini tried to regain control, his voice cracking through a forced smile. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is obviously rehearsed. Anyone could memorize..." She cut him off. "Then explain the missing phrase." He blinked. "What phrase?" She turned to the screen and pointed at a faint marking near the bottom. A line almost invisible beneath the main script. "That symbol. You cropped it out of your slide." Gasps filled the air. "It's the Oban word for origin. My father used to hide his initials inside his research. This was his signature." The moderator leaned forward. "Are you saying this document was taken from her father's work?" She didn't answer. She didn't have to. The audience already knew. Phones were out, cameras flashing, journalists whispering headlines. Mancini's mask finally cracked. "You don't know what you're saying," he hissed. "Your father, he sold that research. I have the rights." "Do you?" she asked softly. Her question hit like a punch. She reached into her cardigan pocket and pulled out a folded yellowed page, a letter sealed in brittle plastic. "This is the original field note from his last expedition. The date on it is 6 months before your paper was published." The moderator took it from her, his eyes scanning the page. The signature matched. The handwriting matched. Everything matched. Mancini stepped back, color draining from his face. "This can't be..." "It is," she said quietly. "You built your career on stolen words." The crowd fell into a deadly silence. The air itself felt heavy. One of the senior professors, an old man in a gray suit, stood up slowly. "Dr. Mancini," he said, voice sharp, "I was there when you first presented this paper. You told us it came from an anonymous village source. Was that a lie? Mancini opened his mouth, but nothing came out. Just a dry rasp of breath. The moderator turned to the cameras. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll take a brief break. But the crowd didn't move. No one wanted to leave. All eyes were fixed on the man who had mocked a cleaning girl, now exposed by the very truth he tried to erase. And as the girl stood there, framed by the projector's light, her father's words glowing behind her, one thought spread through the hall like wildfire. The man who once silenced others had finally been silenced himself. Turn off the projector, Doctor. Mancini barked, but no one moved. Cameras kept flashing. Phones kept recording. The truth was already out, and he could feel it tightening around his neck like a noose. The moderator's voice trembled. Dr. Mancini, do you have any response to this evidence? Mancini looked around the room. Dozens of faces he once commanded now staring at him like strangers. You think she's telling the truth? He snapped. She's just a maid's daughter. You people would believe anything dramatic. The room went quiet. Too quiet. Then someone whispered, We believed you for years. That whisper spread like wildfire, 100 quiet murmurs turning into open disbelief. His name, once said with admiration, now sounded like mockery. He slammed his palm on the table. This is ridiculous. You all know me, my reputation. But the moderator cut him off. Reputation isn't proof, Dr. Mancini. His voice cracked. You think she could have done this? She doesn't even belong here. The girl didn't flinch. Her tone was calm, steady. Neither did my father, but he taught me everything you tried to erase. Her words hit harder than a slap. The journalists in the front row scribbled furiously. Microphones inched closer. One of the scholars stood. If her claim is true, this entire theory collapses, he said gravely. Every award, every citation, every paper built on a lie. The crowd erupted, flashes, voices, movement. Mancini stumbled back, hands trembling. No, this isn't how it ends. But it was. Security moved in quietly, guided by the event organizers, who were whispering into their earpieces. The moderator announced, We will be suspending Dr. Mancini's session until further notice. The man who once commanded stages was now being led off one, face pale, eyes hollow, words tangled in denial. Wait, no! You can't do this. I built this conference. I made this field. The doors closed behind him with a heavy thud. Silence followed. Then one slow clap echoed through the hall. It came from the outsider ally, the senior linguist who had doubted her at first. He stood, looking directly at her. You spoke truth with courage, he said. That takes more than any degree. The crowd rose to their feet. Applause filled the room, not the loud, chaotic kind, but the deep, meaningful kind that shakes the air with respect. The girl blinked, overwhelmed, her hands trembling for the first time since the confrontation began. In that moment, she didn't look like a child cleaning floors. She looked like the heir of something powerful, a legacy reclaimed, and as the cameras turned to her, flashes reflecting in her tear-filled eyes, one thing became clear. The fall of a fraud had just given rise to the daughter of the man he stole from. A story once buried in silence had finally spoken, in her father's voice, through her own. Did you see this? It's everywhere. The young woman froze. Her phone screen glowed with the video. That moment, Dr. Mancini's meltdown. The insults, the truth, all of it, raw and unedited. Within 12 hours, the clip had exploded across social media. Millions of views, thousands of comments, some shocked, some cheering, some refusing to believe. One tweet read, "When the maid's daughter speaks more truth than the professors combined." Another said, "Black voices don't need permission to be heard." For the first time, the world wasn't laughing at her. They were listening. She sat on the edge of her bed, staring at her reflection. "They finally see me," she whispered. But the smile didn't come. Not yet. Her phone buzzed non-stop. Notifications from journalists, universities, even publishers. Everyone wanted her story. The prodigy who exposed a fraud. But beneath the noise, the threats began, hidden in comments. Anonymous messages. "You ruined a great man's life. Stay quiet, girl. You'll regret this." She felt her stomach twist. Fame had come overnight, but so had the danger. Her mother's voice broke the silence. "You did what was right. Don't let fear take that away." The girl nodded slowly, gripping her phone tighter. "I'm not afraid, Mama. Not anymore." Outside, the city buzzed. Billboards flashing headlines, talk shows debating, influencers dissecting every second of the viral clip. And somewhere, in a dim office far away, Dr. Mancini watched the same video, his face red, his hands shaking. "They're destroying me," he hissed, "over one mistake." But it wasn't one mistake. It was years of stolen credit, erased names, buried truths. And now every buried word was surfacing. The clip didn't just expose him, it cracked open an entire system built on silence. Across campuses and research labs, other scholars began to speak out about discrimination, stolen work, invisible contributors. The movement had started, and it carried her name. Still, she didn't post anything. She didn't need to. The world was already speaking for her. Yet deep down, she knew this was just the beginning. The truth had gone viral, but justice hadn't arrived yet. "Why would you go back there?" her mother asked, voice trembling. The young woman zipped her worn-out backpack and said quietly, "Because the truth doesn't end with a viral clip." Weeks had passed since the video storm. Universities had issued apologies. Dr. Mancini had vanished from public view, but the girl, the maid's daughter turned linguist, was returning to the same university that once mocked her, not for revenge, but to reclaim what was stolen. The sun beat down on the marble steps as she walked through the campus gates. Students turned, whispers followed, some eyes showed guilt, others admiration. Inside the main hall, banners hung for a New Voices Symposium, and right at the center of the stage, her name. Guest speaker, Aisha Daniels. Her heart pounded. Just months ago, she was scrubbing floors here while people like Mancini debated the origins of her father's language, calling it primitive. Now they wanted her to speak about its brilliance. A man approached her backstage, offering a handshake. "Miss Daniels, it's an honor. I used to work with Dr. Mancini." She paused. "Used to?" He nodded awkwardly. "He resigned. The scandal destroyed him." Aisha's eyes softened, but her voice stayed steady. "He destroyed himself." When her turn came, she stepped into the spotlight. The hall went silent. Cameras flashed. Her voice didn't shake. "For generations, our stories were told about us, never by us. But today, that changes. The language my father taught me was never lost. It was stolen. And I'm here to take it back." The audience rose to their feet. Applause thundered. Some cried. Some couldn't look at her. In that moment, she didn't just speak for herself. She spoke for every silenced voice, every forgotten name, every black scholar erased from history. Outside, as the crowd dispersed, she stood alone beneath the old university banner. The same wind that once carried whispers of mockery now carried something else. Respect. A journalist approached her, mic trembling. "Aisha, after everything that's happened, what's next for you?" She smiled faintly. "The return was never about me. It's about making sure no one like me ever has to return just to be heard. Do you think they'll remember me, Mama? Aisha whispered, staring out at the city skyline, the same one that once felt too big for her name to echo through. Her mother smiled softly. Child, they already do. Months had passed since the symposium. The clip of Aisha's speech had gone beyond viral. It had become history. Schools started teaching her father's language. Black scholars who were once ignored were being invited to speak, to write, to lead. But Aisha didn't care about fame. She cared about truth. She stood in a classroom now, chalk dust on her fingers, teaching a new generation the same words her father once murmured to her at night. Each word carries a story, she told her students. Each story carries a people. One of the students raised a hand. Miss Daniels, why did you forgive him? The professor who mocked you? Aisha paused. The question hit deeper than expected. Because anger can build walls, she said slowly, but forgiveness builds doors. And I'd rather leave a door open for change than a wall that traps us all. The classroom fell silent. For the first time, she realized how much had shifted, not just around her, but within her. That evening, she walked through the university courtyard. A new plaque gleamed under the setting sun, in honor of Dr. Aisha Daniels, for reclaiming the lost voices of a forgotten language. Tears welled in her eyes. Somewhere, she could almost hear her father's voice whispering, "Now they listen." A gentle wind brushed through her curls. She looked up at the bronze statue beside the plaque, not of a scholar in a suit, but of a woman holding an open book, carved with the same words her father once taught her. Language is not power. It's memory. As the camera pulled back, Aisha's voice lingered over the city lights. This isn't the end of my story. It's the beginning of ours, the story of every voice that refused to stay silent, and finally was heard. If this story touched something deep inside you, don't just scroll away. Because stories like Aisha's aren't just fiction. They are reflections of what so many have lived through in silence. If you or someone you know has ever faced humiliation, been underestimated, or had your voice ignored because of who you are, your story matters. Don't let it fade into the noise. Share it in the comments below. Let the world hear you. Type justice in the comments if you stand with truth, equality, and the power of Black voices rising against silence. Every single comment, every single share pushes this message further, that no one's story deserves to be buried. Like this video if you believe that one voice can change everything. Share it with someone who needs to be reminded of their worth. And subscribe if you want more powerful Black tales, real voices, and untold struggles that deserve to be seen and heard. Together, we can make sure stories like Aisha's don't just end, they echo. This is more than content. This is community. This is change. Be part of it. Be one of the Black voices.